Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about all of the fantasy series I have DNF'd or am not going to finish, I'm not going to continue on with. And I have quite a list here. So before we get into actually talking about all of those series, let's start with a quick disclaimer.
Disclaimer.
Warning, this video does contain some unpopular opinions. Please proceed with caution. This video may include opinions that differ from your own. Everyone does have different opinions, and no book will be for everyone. Some of the thoughts that may go through your head as you're watching this video include: did she even read this book? Is she a true fantasy fan? If only she had read it smarter. Well, if she just reads at least 3 more books in the series, then she'll love it. How dare you call yourself a fantasy fan? Your opinion is wrong. All of these thoughts are valid. And if you feel this way, I don't blame you. However, all opinions are my own. So once again, proceed with caution and take nothing in this video personally. And now, let's talk about all of the series. Let's start with the most popular one, because I feel like that is a really good way to make the most people upset the quickest. So we're going to start with the most popular fantasy series that I will not be continuing, and that's The Wheel of Time. I read Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. I didn't like it. I really didn't like anything about it. I didn't like the characters. I didn't find the plot that intriguing, and the world building itself, while I can tell that Robert Jordan knows every single thing about his world and can tell that this world becomes so expansive and so wonderful to explore, the style of world building and the way it was executed just wasn't for me. I don't love heavy, dense descriptions of world building, of histories of world. There may be some exceptions to this, but the way it was executed in Eye of the World, at least, just wasn't for me. I'm especially not super intrigued to continue on because I've heard that there's a large chunk of this series that a lot of people describe as like the slog of the series, and I found the Eye of the World a slog. So imagine how I would feel about books that are actually described as the slog of this series. It's not the series for me. So I know that this one's super popular, and don't blame you if you love it, but it's just not for me, unfortunately. The second most popular one, which may actually be even more popular than Wheel of Time, I don't know which one's more popular. Sound off in the comments which one you think of these two is more popular. That's going to be the Farseer Trilogy by Robin Hobb. Once again, I just didn't love the plot and the pacing of this one. I actually liked Assassin's Apprentice. I ended up giving that one 4 stars, and I really liked Robin Hobb's writing. I mean, you can tell that Robin Hobb has a beautiful writing style. I can see why so many people love it. And I didn't mind Fitz as a character. I'd heard, some mixed things about Fitz, so I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about him, but I didn't mind him. And I actually quite liked the plot of this one, and like the coming of age story following Fitz from a young boy, and the ending of this one was quite explosive. But then I had found that Royal Assassin, the sequel to Assassin's Apprentice, is described as a lot of people's favorite in this trilogy. And I got a good chunk of the way through this one and was so incredibly bored. I think I was more willing to kind of get through the slower parts of Assassin's Apprentice with the hope that Royal Assassin would be so much better for me, because I'd heard that so many other people had loved it more, and it just wasn't like doing anything for me, and it wasn't any better than Assassin's Apprentice. In fact, I had actually found it a little bit slower than Assassin's Apprentice, and just found I didn't really care. So I was really, really bored. It was feeling like a chore to read. This is not to say that I am not going to try Robin Hobb ever again. I definitely still want to try the other trilogy, Ship Traders. I definitely still want to try the Live Ship Traders trilogy, because I've heard that that one is written in third person, it's following multiple perspectives, it's following a new cast of characters. Maybe that one will connect with me more, but I was not a fan of Farseer, so I'm so sorry to all the Robin Hobb fans, but that one was not for me. Gentleman Bastard. I read The Lies of Locomora. I actually quite enjoyed it. I liked the characters a lot. I loved the character interactions with each other and the dynamics between all of the different characters. I really liked it. There were a lot of parts of that book that were very slow for me, but then the character interactions and the scenes with the dialogue were so snappy and so good that it kind of balanced out some of the slower scenes that were harder to get through for me. So I didn't love that book, but I enjoyed it, and I feel very comfortable with not continuing on with the series and just having read that first book. I feel like I got enough story from that first one, and I know that the sequel is a like seafaring adventure. I think they're on a boat, and I can't stand seafaring fantasy. I really don't like it. And I just didn't love the writing style itself enough, or like the characters enough, to continue on with the series. I was perfectly content with just having read the first book. So that is one that, it's not that I disliked the first book, it just didn't capture me quite enough. It wasn't an all-time favorite for me to like feel like I have to continue on, especially knowing that the second book I probably wouldn't enjoy very much. And considering that this isn't even a finished series and we aren't sure if it's going to be a finished series. So all those reasons, I feel good not continuing on with the series and just enjoying that first book. Next series I have is the Atlas series by Olivia Blake. This is one, I read the Atlas 6. I actually quite enjoyed a lot of that book, and then really didn't enjoy other parts of that book. I've had very mixed feelings on that book, and it was one where I wasn't sure the entire time if I even was enjoying it, but I couldn't look away from it. Like, I had to finish it. I really enjoyed some of the character work. The characters weren't great people, but I kind of enjoyed their, like, following these messy characters and following their messy angst with each other. But there was no world building, there was no real like explanation of magic or anything like that. So there were things that I liked, but things that I also really didn't like. And I've heard that the sequel isn't great. So this is another one like Lies of Locomora, where I enjoyed the first one enough, but I didn't love it enough to feel like I have to continue on. I feel like I got enough of a story from the first book, even though it does leave off on a bit of a cliffhanger. I feel like I'm content with just having read that first book and saying, okay, this is one I don't have to finish. The next series I have is The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. This is one where I read the first book, Leviathan Wakes, and I thought it was okay. I gave it 3.5 stars. Again, there were things I really liked about it and some things I wasn't as crazy about. And then I started reading Caliban's War, and I just found that I really didn't care. I didn't care about anything going on, and really didn't want to be reading this, I think it's 9-book series, if I wasn't like absolutely loving it. So that was one that I was just okay with saying, not for me too. I'm glad I read the first book, but yeah, that's one that, with how long that series was, maybe if it was like a trilogy or a duology, I would have finished it out. But with how long it is, if I am not loving it, I just don't want to commit to something that long. The Broken Earth by N.K. Jemisin. I read the 5th season. I can see why people love this series and people love this particular book. I get it. The way it was executed and something that happens at the end, it really is masterfully done. But for me, N.K. Jemisin's writing style just doesn't quite connect with me. The way she executes her world building and her character development, there's something about it that I just feel a disconnect with. I didn't feel any sort of emotional moments towards this, and I know for others it's very emotional. So this was one that, again, I'm glad I read the first book to kind of see what all the hype is about, and I can see why, again, people love it, but it's just not for me. It wasn't for me. I was really bummed about that one because I was really hoping I was going to love it. A Chorus of Dragons by Jen Lyons. This is one that I read A Ruin of Kings, and no. hated A Ruin of Kings. Hated it. I could not stand this book. And again, like with everything, I can see why certain types of readers love this kind of story. It is very complex in the way it's told, and it is purposefully hard to follow at times because it's making the reader kind of puzzle things out and put things together. And I think certain readers love that kind of exercise while they're reading. I do not. I don't like being confused. I don't like convoluted story structures. This one is told in a couple different perspectives in 2 different timelines, but it's following the same character. So you're following one perspective of a character telling his own story, and then you're following another character's perspective telling that other character's story, but from a different point in time, and you're flip-flopping between those 2 perspectives. And then you also have a magic where people can shapeshift into others, and people can be others through like reincarnation. And so you at one point just have no idea who is who in this book, and you're following 2 different timelines, and then you're also having to follow footnotes from another character's perspective that's correcting things in the main perspectives. That it is so convoluted. The way it is told, I couldn't stand it. Oh my gosh, I just hated it. I didn't have any fun, but I could see again why others would like that kind of story structure and puzzling everything out. But it was so not for me. I am not that type of reader at all. All right, next one is going to be Shatter Me by Tahara Mafi. I read Shatter Me several years ago because it was so hyped and I wanted to see what all the hype was about. This writing style is so extra. I just could not with the writing style. It was told in this way that felt like it was like slam poetry. Like everything was like very staccato sentences and over the top metaphors and descriptions, and just it was not at all connecting with me. And then there's characters where I knew from the way people talk about this series online, I knew that there was a certain character who was eventually going to be the love interest. And the way he was portrayed in the first book, he was a terrible person in the first book, like horrible. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the one that becomes the love interest that everyone ends up loving. He's horrible. So I just was not into that at all. Nope, this was so not for me. So yeah, Shatter Me. That one I haven't talked about in a really, really long time on this channel. Powder Mage by Brian McClellan, which is starting with, oh my gosh, I don't even remember the first book. Promise of Blood. This is one that had a really cool concept, but I just couldn't stand the characters, or really, I just didn't care. I just didn't care one little bit about any of it. And it's a really cool magic system that's all around like gunpowder and certain characters being able to like snort gunpowder to get certain abilities. Pretty bizarre concept, but I was like very curious to see how it would be executed. And the answer is not in a way that I like. So this is one that I just personally wasn't a fan of, just didn't care enough to continue on. That's it. Wayward Children. This one I gave 3 books. So this one is a series of novellas, which is why I think I was willing to give it like more of a chance and read a couple books in the series. And my experience reading those books, the whole time I was kind of perplexed figuring out the tone of these books. The first book in particular, tonally, was kind of all over the place for me. In certain places it read like a middle grade, and others it read very, very adult. And then in some parts it was extremely dark, but then in other parts it was very like lighthearted. And so it just had this very strange tonal shift going on where I just had no idea what this book was trying to be at certain parts. And then just the concept of it I really enjoyed, but the execution I was finding with each book just never was hitting as much for me as it seemed to hit for others. So I was just, after 3 books, was like, I don't think that this is going to be for me, and was very bummed by it because so many people seem to love it. And again, I can see why, with all of these, I can see why people love them, but that one, yeah, not for me. The Witcher by Andrzej Sapkowski, another one I gave a very good shot to, because I read the 2 short story collections, which I actually very much enjoy, and then I got to the main series and read the first 3 books and started reading the 4th book and dipped out after about 100 pages into the 4th book. It is very much the writing in this story. It's told in a way that feels very dry. Like it's very much focused on other character perspectives that aren't The Witcher, first of all. So that was my first problem, was for a series called The Witcher, it did not have enough of The Witcher in it. And The Witcher is by far my favorite part of that series. So whenever we were focusing on all these other characters, the majority of the time, I was very annoyed. It's like, get me back to Geralt, because he's the best part of this series. And it was told in a way that it would shift perspectives to characters that were like very minor characters who I didn't care about or didn't know, felt no investment into. And it would tell a certain scene from that character's perspective, and then we would go to a different character. And it was just like told in a way that really wasn't hitting it all for me. And I felt very much like it was a chore to read. So that was one. After 3.5 books, 3 1/4 of a book, I was like, no, I'm not gonna use any more of my time towards this series. My favorite in that series is Baptism of Fire, because that's the one with the most Geralt. So I know a lot of people love The Witcher, but I know a lot of people feel the same way as me, so I don't feel as bad about that one. All right, The Burning by Evan White, starting with Rage of Dragons. Oh my gosh. Okay, so Rage of Dragons, it had such potential. I was so much rooting for it. And I really wasn't a fan of the writing. I found it very melodramatic. Like every chapter would end with a big, and this is how he would get his revenge. And now he would get his revenge at last. Here he comes to get his revenge. It was like every chapter ended like that. And I was like, oh my God, this is so dramatic. And then the main character of Tal was so infuriating. So infuriating. Oh my gosh, he made so many bad decisions. It just was so over the top ridiculous to me. I couldn't stand him. Oh my goodness. I just really hated this main character. And like, it wasn't that I don't understand where he's coming from. Like, I get it. I get his backstory. I get his motivations. I get it all. But my God, he was infuriating, even understanding all of that. I just still felt the same way. So that was one. The magic was not for me. There was a love interest that played a very minor role that felt super unnecessary. Oh my gosh, she was just there basically to spout some world building details, and that was it. So it was just not for me at all. I just did not like this at all. And if you do like it, I'm very happy for you. Because I was really rooting for this one. All right, the last one I'm going to feature on this video before I anger too many more people is going to be the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. I am so sorry to all the Murderbot fans out there, because I know there are a lot of you. There are so many of you. Please don't come for me. I did not really find anything I liked about All Systems Red, and Murderbot as a character, I can understand why people really like Murderbot, but for me, Murderbot's personality just didn't do a whole lot. The amount of times Murderbot would talk about this one TV show, instead of, all I want to do instead of killing people is I want to watch this one TV show. If I had to hear about that one TV show one more time, I was going to lose it. I was going to lose it. And then you have a plot that I had no idea what was going on with the plot outside of like Murderbot. And then you have other characters outside of Murderbot that I just didn't care at all about. And it was a novella, so it's hard to like really get a ton of depth from just reading that first novella, but I had zero interest in continuing on and seeing where it would go because I really did not care for Murderbot as a character, which I feel like is so bad to say because so many people love Murderbot. But yeah, I just did not connect with anything in this book. I'm so sorry. So yeah, those are all of the series that I am not going to be continuing on with. So now I'm going to toss it to you because I just gave all of my unpopular opinions. What is your most unpopular opinion? What is the fantasy series that is like the most popular in the community that you will not be continuing on with? Leave those comments down below so that we can have some unpopular opinions together. And thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye!